This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Welcome into the Triple Option. Paul Catalina, Stephen Simcox from an undisclosed location today, as he has to get on the road as soon as the show's over. And I was told, Stephen, by our friend Chris Allman, that you had a very unique fan experience watching TCU in West Virginia this week. As someone who has to, do a TCU podcast for Locked On, I know that you have to watch it in like two different ways, but I did not expect to hear the third way that you would have to watch a game and layer you have to put on it. So we're going to talk about that in a second, because in our first segment, we're going to talk about what's up with TCU and like why, they've only lost two games. They lost two games, so they've only lost them by a combined 6 points. So it's not like the ship is sinking, but the close games are not what they were. But first off, Stephen, how you doing today?
I'm good, Paul. I always feel like when I'm on a Zoom call, it's like a Futurama episode. And so I feel like those, like the head of a person from the past that's just kind of here on the show with you. But thanks for doing this. And yeah, it's always fun to talk college football with you. I had more fun talking about TCU last season, but I'm always willing to talk about the Frogs, so we can suffer through it together.
So I don't know if you probably don't remember this because you're considerably younger than me, but when the first video phones came out, it was like just a regular, POTS phone that had a camera in it. And if you wanted to talk to your grandma and she lived in Wichita, you would buy the set of phones and you would send that one to her in Wichita. And then on this little tiny screen, it would, you would be able to have a video chat while you were on the phone with her. And I remember when I was in the store and my dad was there and I was like, Dad, we got to get this. And he goes, why? That's it. Why? You don't need that. Yeah. I thought, it's like the future. He's like, no. That's no good. That's no good.
It's just a fad.
And then,
phones are just a fad.
And then here we are, and like it's the most commonplace thing in the world now. But I remember that conversation with him. It was like, no. And then I think about that a lot whenever I'm on Zooms, and I like try to put me and my dad in like different periods of time. Like, Dad, have you seen the cotton gin? Never gonna take off. Like you're just it's never gonna take off. People aren't gonna want that. Like,
and I remember even in like the start of the pandemic, I wasn't real familiar with Zoom at that time. I knew what it was, but I'd never used it. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, here's this thing that we can all use. And now, of course, like Microsoft Teams has their own deal and everybody has different video conference tools. But yeah, it's strange how even though the technology's been around for a while now, even in the last 3 years, it's become so much more popular because of the world we live in.
Yeah, no, it's like if somebody asks you can hop on a Zoom, it's either like, oh, that's fine, or you like roll your eyes like, oh, this is going to last forever. There's too many people on this thing. All right, Stephen, what's going on with TCU? Last year they won the close games. This year they can't. I'd like to say it's as simple as Max Duggan had that in him a little bit more, but I mean they lost a lot of NFL players off this roster, and they have a new team. So some of that is built over time, but I guess also just the uniqueness of last year's TCU season can't be lost on this either.
No, it can't. I mean, I feel like there's obviously multiple things at play, but yes, they had huge roster turnover from last season. And I guess I sort of foolishly thought, when we talk about like the new Big 12 and what it's going to look like, and now it's an even more different conversation than it was when it was just going to be 14 teams. But I guess the question everybody had was, could anybody really sustain success year in and year out? Because usually in this sport, Paul, like the blue bloods are the teams that can replace the roster. Like, okay, we lost 5, 6, 8 NFL players. Well, next season we have 4 and 5-star X. And so we're just going to plug them into those positions. And there will be some growing pains, but probably still win 10 or 11 games. And so I thought TCU could buck that trend this season, even though that hasn't been their usual MO, because they had a really good recruiting class coming in 2023. Because of the portal now, there's ways to, fill the holes in your roster and have guys that can make more of an immediate impact. So I just didn't really see the extent of this happening to where, there are times where they look like a really young team and a team that's kind of still figuring out how to play together. And as you said, last season, they won all the close games. They found ways to make things happen down the stretch and survive, when they played poorly. And so you get in a dogfight with West Virginia, which West Virginia's defense is really good. And in the second half, they adjusted and made that a rock fight, and TCU just couldn't find a way to respond. And so they're trying to overcome that. I stupidly said on Garrett and Jack's show before the year that I thought this group actually might be a little more talented than last year's team. I didn't know if they were going to win the same amount of games. I guess I got half that right, because obviously they're not going to win the same amount of games as they did last year. And then the other part of this that I think is fascinating, defensively, they've kind of bounced back after the Colorado game. I don't really know. I mean, the offense turned over a lot of talent. I have not been super impressed with Kendall Briles so far. Like the stats would tell you, if you just look at the numbers, you're like, okay, they scored 42 against Colorado. They scored 36 against Houston, 34 against SMU. But they're really struggling in the red zone. They're really struggling in short yardage. And there's reasons for that. Like their offensive line is not nearly as good as it was last year. Losing Kendre Miller was a big deal. Losing Max as somebody who could just run people over on 3rd and 2 or 4th and 1 is a big factor also. But I don't know what the identity of this offense is, Paul, besides the fact that they just like to go really fast, which if it's working, that's great. But if it's not, then you're sort of just leaving your defense out to dry. And they got in a situation in the third quarter of that game, especially, where they kept going 3 and out in like 30 seconds. And then they're backed up, so they punt, and West Virginia would get the ball back like in plus territory or near midfield. And that's just not a way to have success. So they're going to have to find a way to figure that out, because they're going to face better defenses down the stretch, like Texas and Oklahoma, K-State. And if they put up an effort like that against those teams, then it could get really ugly.
Yeah, I always kind of felt the Briles offense, for all of its successes, was the Ricky Bobby offense. Like, I want to go fast. Yeah. First or last, baby.
Ain't first or last.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it felt, because there were times, and there are times, where going fast does not benefit you.
Mm-hmm.
And when they lost games to good teams, that's usually what happened. Was they needed to slow it down for a minute, and they couldn't. You would look at, Bryce Petty or Seth Russell out there, and they would, even they'd be trying, like Kendall Briles on the sideline, like calling the plays, and you're like, you could see everybody's like, it's been 8 whole seconds. What are we doing? You're like,
yeah,
you got 17 more. So
shake and bake, baby.
Yeah,
shake and bake.
Exactly. It's fine. Like, you have 17 more seconds. You do this 5 or 6 more times, and then like more than a minute will be gone in this game when there's only 4 of them left. So like 25% of the game will just be gone because you waited to do the exact thing you were going to do a second ago. And that is just something they couldn't like adjust to or adapt to. And it wasn't about, like, some people say it's about running the ball. No, they run the ball as fast as they throw it. Like, it's just go, 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 go. The idea is, as soon as the ball is set and everybody is standing on the spot that you're going to snap the ball and go. You don't want the defense a chance to adjust. You don't really want to have them a chance to substitute. Part of the reason that they run the wide receivers so far outside the hash is so they can sneak them onto the field, and maybe you don't realize that they substituted, so you don't. And look, they made the whole rule about substituting where the umpire stands over the ball just because of those kind of offenses, because that was what they were doing. So it's all about fast, 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 fast. And I think that there are some limitations to it when you don't have everything clicking. Like you mentioned, the offensive line is not great in short yardage. Well, you're going to have those situations. Like, not every run can be a 30-yard, bust out run. So those are the limitations that do come with it. And there is, like a veteran aspect to the team. To me also, that team last year had been through a lot. I mean, they'd really been through a lot. Max Duggan in particular had a very up and down career. it started out the year, I guess, kind of on a down note because he didn't win the starting job.
Yeah.
So, they had some success with Gary Patterson, but they were right at the end of where he had kind of lost his effectiveness and was worried about all this other outside noise. And, he became like a conspiracy theorist about everything. And you're like, Gary, don't worry. Like all this stuff, don't worry about it. Like still just be. And I think that's the thing that's probably upsetting TCU fans the most is they had a Belichick level football genius on their staff running the program, but he had emotions where Bill Belichick has none of them. It's just Bill Belichick would never be mad at a safety for barking at him. Like he might yell back at him during the game, but then after the game they'd be like, "Well, coach, so I saw that the other team's safety was yelling at you as he was getting ejected." Bill Belichick be like, "Yeah, well, that's football. It's intense. Things happen, and we're just happy that we came out of here with the win."
And Gary's written a whole novel about it. Like he's got a 20-minute web series that he's ready to just unleash on anybody who will listen. But no, those are all valid. I think from the offense perspective, the things that kill me, the pace of it. A lot of times, like when they do break off a big play, there's just such a infatuation with, okay, we got to go now. And I get it. Like, as you said, you're trying to get the defense on their heels. But I'm like, man, if you just wait a couple seconds here and sort of see what the defense is in, like, I feel like you're working into your own disadvantage by just handing the ball off quickly and trying to bust another big play. And then in those third and fourth downs, it's sort of the same. It's like, all right, let's get this fire drill going. And the defense is not going to know what happens, but maybe just get the right play call in, and that can help you. And so I don't know, Sonny is like, he's an offensive mind, but he's actually typically been pretty, or at least in the last few years, he's been more hands off with that aspect of it. Like he doesn't want to get super involved and meddle too much in the play calling. I think he might have to take the reins a little bit more. He did mention in his press conference this week that he feels like the offense is lacking an identity, and he's told the staff like that needs to change. Like we got to fix that. And so maybe that's the spark that at least gives them some more direction moving forward. But it just hasn't fully come together. And, I think Sonny made all the right moves and pulled all the right strings last year. There have been some situations this year where I'm just kind of scratching my head about what the call is, what their philosophy is. And so, again, that's sort of regressing to the mean as well in close games. But I'm still hopeful they can turn it around. But, I really thought they could go 6-1 or 7-0 in their first 7 games, and they're already 3-2. So you have no margin for error. I was saying on the podcast this week, I was like, Iowa State on the road and then BYU at home. Like these 2 games determine your season. If you can win those and figure some things out and get to 5-2, then I think in the back half of the schedule when things are tougher, okay, at least you have like more of a vision of what you want to do, and maybe you can steal a few games. But man, if you're sitting at 3-3, or even worse, if you have a losing record, then this could go south fast, because for all the talk about like chemistry and team camaraderie and all those things, a lot of that's tied around winning and losing. So if the losing starts to happen more frequently, then things can unravel in a hurry. So they're sort of teetering here. There's time to figure it out, but you've given up all your mulligans already, it feels like, and you're only 5 games through the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have room for error anymore. Like, and look, the CFP is off the table, so you can kind of stop worrying about that in one regard and just keep it. Because that's a lot of pressure, too, because you go around, the fans are like, well, can we do it again? Can we do it again? And Georgia's not as good now. Like, Georgia's maybe not as good. They don't have all those guys. Maybe if we played them again, it wouldn't be 65-7. Like, all these things you have to answer.
It'd be like 45-14 or something like that.
Yeah. So all of those things that go on, so it's different. I do think about this. So Garrett Riley goes to Clemson to fix their offense, which I would say that the problems that they've had are not Garrett Riley's fault. It's not scheme problems. They don't have at Clemson what TCU had a year ago. Dabo Swinney would change religions for Quentin Johnston. So, I mean, let's face it. So he would kill for Quentin Johnston right now. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have that guy on the roster that Garrett Riley had. Now, their play calling is, in my opinion, a lot better than it was. But they don't have the horses that they've had in the past. Like, if you gave Garrett Riley, Trevor Lawrence, and Etienne and T. Higgins, that team would average 81 points a game. I mean, that's just how it would be. And then Kendall Briles, who's well thought of, comes over to TCU to take over, but he's taking over a completely new team. And it is a very different – it's not a very different system, but there are – just watching last year to this year, there are stark differences in it. And you can tell that right now.
No, you definitely can. And, I mean, Quentin Johnston, well, I think you could make an argument for all these guys. They really miss Steve Avila in the middle at the guard position, who's with the Rams now. But even in games where Quentin wasn't making huge plays all the time, just the gravity of the fact that every defense coordinator was like, we have to stop this guy every single week. It opened up opportunities for other players. And they really haven't, this is the other kind of head scratching thing about the offense when it relates to Kendall. They haven't had much of a vertical passing game yet. I mean, they haven't been able to connect on those. They haven't taken a lot of deep shots. That was what he was so known for at Baylor. I know he's kind of evolved and adjusted from that period of time as well, but they weren't always super efficient last season. They always had that club in the bag though, or they could go to Quentin or they could go to Darius Davis or someone down the field and make a big play. And they haven't found that player yet. So Dalen Wright's a good wideout. He came over from Minnesota and he's finally healthy. I think he might become that guy, but he's not Quentin Johnston. And you miss that first round type talent on the outside that, when he was healthy, he was incredible. And even when he wasn't, and he was kind of banged up, the gravity of the defense always shifted to him. And so it made everybody's job in life easier. And so they kind of tried to sell it in the offseason. Like, well, we might be deeper at wide receiver this year. And we got 6 or 7 guys that could be the number one. And I think it's really turned out to be more like we got 6 or 7 guys that are good and that we like, but nobody has really emerged as the go-to guy or the alpha in the room, and they're missing that piece of the offense, and it's hurt kind of every aspect of it, all 3 levels so far this season. So those are questions that they got to go to the drawing board with. And I mean, hey, maybe this is just life for TCU. It's going to take some time to get to a place where they can follow up an amazing year with a really good one. Because I thought it could be this season, but right now it's not looking, like the team that I thought would be out there on the field week in and week out.
So, Steven, how did you have to watch this West Virginia game this week?
Yeah, so my wife Kristen, we were down there with her family, and we were doing the thing.
Our national broadcast.
Yeah, that's our national alert. I meant to turn off my phone before we got on here.
No, it was everybody's in this room. So
yeah. It was all America, I think. Yeah. I think that was supposed to be.
Not mine.
Yeah.
Oh, not Jack's?
I'm off the grid.
Yeah.
There you go. That's why Jack's the producer, because he's just totally
look who's a little smarmy guy over there.
There you go, Jack.
It just went off.
Late.
Yeah. We
off the grid.
Steve and I have already defeated the aliens, and you were eaten up by them, so there you go.
That's right. The microchip's already in my body, Jack. It's been there for 10 whole seconds. So good luck figuring. I'm way ahead of you now. The government's already downloaded my information. What was the question, Paul?
How'd you have to watch the game? I heard this was fun. Not for you, but.
Yeah, I was with my wife, Kristen, and her family. And Paul, I don't know if you've experienced this. So people that don't care about sports, they think it's really funny that for people like us that care about sports and that take these things seriously and have emotions. And so when you watch a Florida State game, do you typically watch it by yourself or just with your wife, or how do you usually do that if you watch it?
Well, here's the thing, and this is one of the reasons I married her. I watch it with just her. If there are the guy that I stayed with, Ryan, Jack met him. Ryan and Dave and I were at FSU together. I would happily watch the game with them because we are the same. Like, that's like, it would be the same. Happily watch the game with them. I do not like to watch it with outsiders, even people who are sports fans, because I'm in my feelings and you are not. You're enjoying watching this game. Yeah. I do that for every other football game I watch. Like, I'm invested. This is work. And I think we all kind of feel like that for our team. Like, listen, I'm an extension of the coaching staff. I'm here to work. And that's kind of how you feel a little bit, even though it's a total fantasy. So, yes, Amanda is a huge Kansas basketball fan. And she watched the entire national championship game in 2022 in our bedroom with the door shut. I was not allowed to even see or speak to her. And it was going poorly for them for a majority of that game before they won. And she had been so in her feelings for so long that she wasn't even celebrating until like 5 minutes later. Like, they hit her, Bill Self is finally like getting up to the podium and they're giving the trophy. Yeah. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And when you're around the people who don't care, they look at you kind of like people watching a psychological experiment through glass.
Yeah, and people make jokes because they think it's like, oh, it's a funny thing that so and so likes it. But so I'm watching on my phone. We're at we had a big birthday party for my mother-in-law, and so I'm kind of watching on my phone. Most of her family is big Astros fans, so I was like, I'm safe. They got Astros game on the big screen. They're watching Astros D-backs. They're trying to see if they're going to win the AL West. They're invested. I don't have to worry about this. Well, about midway through, somebody realizes I'm watching on my phone, and they're like, "Oh, Steven, I forgot you're such a big TCU fan. We'll put the TCU game on the big TV." And I was trying to be like gracious and be like, no, that's totally fine. I don't need this. I have it right here. But they're like, no, we insist. So all of a sudden they turn it on, and it's right as the game turns. Like, things were going well, and then things were not going well. And so I'm trying to hold it together. And there were a couple blocked field goals. People are giving me a hard time. I'm just sort of going with it. And then the game ends, and as part of my job at Locked On, we have to film these like instant reaction videos. And so I was legitimately bummed because they lost, but I was also I was really just leaving the room because I needed to film something. And so I left, and I didn't really say anything to anybody. And so then people were like trying to come flag me down and be like, "Oh, we're really sorry. Like, we didn't know this was a big deal and all this." And I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. Like, I just need to do this now. I have to like do a little post game thing." And so it was a whole deal. But yeah, I tried to avoid everyone watching it with me, but it didn't end up happening. And everybody meant well, but they just don't understand, how invested we are, Paul, how much this means to us.
Yeah. I had several friends of mine in town, and like people have been like, "Hey man, that Florida State game's on this weekend. It should be a good one. Let's go out to the bar and watch it." I'd be like, "Listen, man, I like you. You're a good guy. I would love to have beers with you any other time. But you're not me. Like, you're not in it. Like, I just." And then part I'm trying to tell them, like, listen, I'm embarrassed about what I might say in the moment, and I'm not that intense, but I do like to like slam my hand down on my recliner occasionally, or like I do like to, explode with emotion when big things happen, and maybe say some things that I don't mean, but I'm feeling in the moment to the opposing coach, who I may or may not have respect for. And I'll just rewind to last week when FSU broke a 7-year losing streak to Clemson. I had some choice words to say to Dabo Swinney. Did I mean them? I'm not sure. He and I would have to work that out in therapy. But it's, But
that was your time.
It was my time. Yeah. It was my time. It was my moment. As a matter of fact, I thought about the time that Q and I went to the Cotton Bowl when they beat Notre Dame, and I've got this great picture on my phone of Dabo celebrating, and I thought of that and be like, "Yeah, you're not so happy now, are you?" But anyway, but yeah, no, I get it, Steven. I get it. There are people who are like us and people who are not. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, the people who are not, you can't make them like us. So you just have to try to exist in the realm.
That was profound. I love that.
Yeah.
That was kind of a long quote, but let's put that up on the wall.
Yeah. You just can't. You just have to exist. All right. When we come back, we're going to play a new game called But Are They Good? So I'm going to throw out some teams. Steven, feel free to throw some back out at me if we haven't gotten to one yet. And we're going to play But Are They Good? This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying